The 13th of October of 2019 was a sad day for K-pop fans all over the world. On this day, a tragic event that would expose all of the dark and putrid details of the K-pop music industry took place. So much so that even the most skeptical of people couldn't turn a blind eye to the fact that the inner workings of this seemingly unsuspecting industry is filled with corruption and exploitation. For instance, Sulli, one of the most prominent K-pop idols back then, had admitted several times already that she was battling with severe social phobia, panic disorder, and depression. In fact, in her diary, where she used to share her innermost feelings, depression and hopelessness were a common theme. But unfortunately, after a group of haters started to harass her on social media, she decided it was time to end it all. Fans all over the world were shocked to hear about what had just happened. After all, she seemed like a beautiful and happy young star with a bright future ahead of herself. However, that was nothing but an act, since she didn't want the fans to know that she was going through all of this alone. And unfortunately, this story is not an anomaly inside the K-pop industry. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. If you want to know the dark truth behind K-pop and why suicide is so common inside this industry, you must first discover how K-pop became what it is today, the questionable methods managers use to source talents, and also the putrid inside stories of this industry. Luckily for you, that's exactly what we will be talking about in this video, so stay tuned. Now, despite only becoming mainstream in the past few years, modern K-pop was launched way back in the 90s. At the time, Korean music was very bland and with practically no discerning features, which in turn made it very hard to become viral. However, a few music producers started to bring some of the unique attention-getting elements of the Western music industry. Things such as flashy performances, easy-to-remember lyrics, and catchy beats. Luckily for them, the Korean music market seemed to love this new modern style of music. And the first K-pop band to make it big of the music industry was Seo Taiji and Boys, a boy band trio that mixed rap with Korean folk music. Their success came practically overnight, having sold more than 1.5 million copies of their first album in less than a month of its release, a feat that was unthinkable for any Korean artist at the time. But it wasn't until the era of social media that K-pop became a thing in the West. After all, the speed at which fans all over the world can share videos and performances from their favorite artists increased exponentially. And I am sure you cannot spend an entire day on Twitter or Instagram and not come across a video from a K-pop band with artists doing jaw-dropping choreographies. Needless to say, that's one of the primary reasons why K-pop bands are so famous, with hundreds of millions of fans worldwide and billions of views on their music videos. And not to mention that they also dictate fashion and music trends all over the world. Truly mind-blowing. As you can see, K-pop has come a long way since it was merely an unknown music genre focused on the Korean local music market, and its explosive growth was not an accident or a mere string of luck. Well, the only problem is that the methods employed by managers and agents are highly questionable. First of all, in K-pop, the artist is a product, even more so than the music. K-pop groups have to sell the image of a happy and blossoming group of young adults living their best lives, and the music is simply a medium for that image to be spread. Unfortunately, this comes at a great cost for artists involved within the industry, with some of them not being able to handle the pressure of having to maintain this image all of the time. And let's not forget about the insane beauty standards they have to abide by. Performers are required to have an extremely slim figure, to the point of anorexia, or else they won't make the cut and be excluded from the industry entirely. Because of that, most young idols and wannabe stars have to endure severely restricting diets to remain extremely slim at all costs. To make matters worse, wannabe stars are also required to have perfectly flawless skin, despite all of the stress and bad diets they have to endure on their day-to-day, which makes most of them resort to plastic surgeries and dubious skin treatments. On top of all of that, K-pop idols are closely watched and judged by their managers. And so, artists have to be on top of their game in every presentation and always maintain an image of being happy and perfect. In fact, some of the idols even have surveillance cameras on their entire house so that managers can watch their every step. And some are prohibited from dating, going out, or having a private life at all, since talent managers think this could be bad for their brand image. As you can expect, the rate of mental health problems such as anxiety and depression within those involved in the industry is alarming. And unfortunately, most young performers cannot seek help to deal with their problems due to a lack of time and the need to appear perfect in the eyes of the fans. Sadly, some performers resort to suicide in order to escape this tragic reality. For instance, one of the most tragic cases of suicide inside K-pop circles was of Junghyun, one of the most successful K-pop artists ever, who had won dozens of awards for his music and amassed tens of millions of fans all over the world. In his last years, he was increasingly open about the mental health issues he was going through, and he also looked for support from his friends and family members. However, all of the pressure, stress, and anxiety he had to endure in his daily life were slowly consuming him, just as he said on his suicide note. "The depression that has slowly eaten away at me has finally consumed me, and I couldn't beat it." Sadly, the young star decided to poison himself using carbon monoxide and end his life. And despite him being public about the mental health issues he was facing, the news of his suicide came as a shock even to those close to him. However, what didn't come out as a surprise was that he attributed most of the problems he was facing to the fame and toxicity he was exposed to every day inside K-pop circles. Just as he has written on his suicide note, "The life of fame was not for me. They say it's hard to bump up against the world and become famous. Why did I choose this life? It's a funny thing. It's a miracle that I lasted this long." Sadly, stories similar to this one are not out of the ordinary. And today, the sad details about his suicide serve as a warning for those who want to get into the K-pop music industry and have no idea about what to expect. However, despite all of the wrongdoings of managers and agents, we have to admit that they know how to transform talented people into superstars. After all, even though the majority of the Western world cannot understand a single word of Korean, these songs and their catchy beats still go viral practically every single day. Needless to say, in an industry where people are drawn by the allure of money and fame, there are lots of sinister inside stories that powerful people try to sweep under the rugs. For instance, sexual abuse is shockingly common practice within K-pop circles, and several artists have already gone public voicing their particular stories. One of the most disturbing stories of sexual abuse was when a group of 40-year-old investors poured drinks on a group of female wannabe stars, even though most of them were underage, and tried to force them into having sex. To make matters worse, besides being subjected to sexual exploitation, some young wannabe stars are also exploited financially in a myriad of ways. Some managers create intentionally misguiding and unclear contracts in order to have young idols sign away their lives and financial future. This typically means that, in case the performer's career does not pan out as expected, he will be left with hundreds of thousands in debt and a damaged reputation. And in the rare case everything goes well and the young star makes it big, managers, CEOs, and all sorts of middlemen will take their fat cut, while the young performer is left with practically nothing. For instance, a former wannabe star publicly voiced her regret about all of the debt she incurred making plastic surgeries and weight loss procedures in order to try to make a name for herself. She even goes on to say that she endured the most severe forms of stress-related problems and food deprivation, but her career still didn't take off because she couldn't beat the weight her managers deemed as ideal. Now, besides all of the warnings voiced by those deeply involved with the K-pop music industry, lots of people still dream of becoming a superstar one day. This in turn perpetuates the series of misconducts and wrongdoings done by managers and agents. First off, most young kids wanting to make it big in the K-pop industry are treated like they are completely disposable. Since most auditions have insane 600-to-1 competitive ratios, heartless judges can reject candidates based on even minor missteps. Because of that, wannabe stars have to put themselves through insane training schedules in order to ace their auditions and have a chance at a contract. Needless to say, only a few of the candidates ever make it. and those who do are hardly better off than those who don't, since now they will have to train even harder and endure 10 times the pressure. For instance, some performers report that their practices would start at 4 a.m. and go up until midnight, and it is not uncommon for them to throw up and pass out due to exhaustion. To make matters worse, young idols are subjected to even stricter evaluations now that the manager's money is on the line. And if at some point the judges and managers are not impressed by what they see, young idols will have their contracts resigned without a second thought and will be left to fend for themselves. Truly heartbreaking. Well, I guess we can only hope that as more and more artists publicly come out voicing their opinions and experiences with the dark side of this industry, things will change for the better. Alright, you've just watched K-pop's global hype and the dark truth behind it. As you can see, behind this facade of fame and glamour lies a great deal of cold-blooded corruption and exploitation. And everybody who wants to get into this industry should be highly concerned about their health and well-being. Now, I want to hear from you. What surprised you the most about K-pop's dark side? Let me know in the comment section down below. And that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and until next time.